Hi, I'm Thaddaus Dawson with the 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation and 10,000 Black Appraisers Incorporated. Depends on how you look at it. This will be our last recorded podcast of this year, and it will be our first podcast that will be displayed next year in 2025. I'm so excited, and it's only appropriate today that we close out this year and start out the new year with none other than Eloris Speight. Eloris is the director of the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Policy Research Center at Alcorn State University. Eloris is also the ever first Black female deputy administrator for the National Resource Conservation Service for the USDA. She also worked for 20 years at Fannie Mae. She's had a very illustrious career. I believe she did her undergraduate work at Hampton University, and then she went on to get her master's degree at the University of Maryland and started her work towards her doctorate degree at George Washington University. I had the pleasure of meeting Eloris this past year in Oklahoma at Langston University's Short Hair Sheep Festival. And sometimes God just brings people together. And I really believe that's what happened here, because at that time we were visiting Langston, I believe, for the second or third time, only because the student body president, Mr. Miles, insisted that we come back and speak to the whole student body. I was trying to explain to him that there were 19 land-grant colleges and not just Langston. But we came back and we have been blessed beyond measure to be able to meet Miss Eloris, and all of this kind of developed because she was extremely nice and gracious. But Shawnee met her first. I guess we all met her together, but then they were hanging out, and typically I don't hang out. I'm usually in my room doing work or sleep. So they hung out on a Friday night, and then we had the opportunity to go to a blues festival on a Saturday evening, which was probably the most fun I've had this year. And without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Miss Eloris Speight.
Well, thank you, Thaddeus. I'm excited to be here. And as you said, so I am the executive director at the Policy Center. We refer to it as the Policy Center at Alcorn State University. And the Policy Center then was authorized in the 2014 Farm Bill, and for two primary reasons. One, to be the voice for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and that's throughout the United States. And so, although the Policy Center is located at Alcorn, it is a national center. And the Farm Bill specified that it was to be located at one of the 1890 universities. And so, Alcorn State University was a successful grantee. The second reason that the Policy Center was created was to ensure that there was data-driven information available for key stakeholders. And those key stakeholders include the Senate and House Agricultural Committees, USDA, and then the general public.
Well, the work that you do is absolutely fascinating and very impactful. I was recently at an event in Washington at the Appraisal Foundation, and part of my frustration sometimes is when I go to these things is that the HBCUs or the underprivileged or underserved are kind of treated as an afterthought. I believe you all make them a priority and are extremely impactful. And one of the things that came up in, I believe it was the AQB meeting, so what are we doing with the HBCUs? And I got so tickled because the person responded as, I called them, well, they won't call me back. And so if you have any dose of cultural competency, that's what happens in HBCUs. They don't call you back. And I just don't have enough sense to take no for an answer. But That being said, sometimes you just got to know the right people. And since meeting you and hanging out with you, I get a lot more callbacks now. So we met, I believe, in April or May in Oklahoma at Langston. But you since have invited us to do things with the Policy Center across the country. So we've been to Houston, Memphis, Alabama, Mississippi a couple of times now, and North Carolina for the Black Farmers Ball. And I am just beyond thankful and grateful that you put trust and belief in us and that we are able to participate with you where we are. I really feel like we are really making a difference. And the first time that I met you in Oklahoma, I was in a breakout session talking about valuation with black farmers, and never have I seen grown men crying about the information being presented and thankful and grateful for the opportunity and the consideration. And that being said, I feel remiss and missing your most recent accomplishment or celebration where you have been honored and placed into the Ag Workers Hall of Fame. That just happened at the Ag Workers Conference at Tuskegee. And unfortunately, I decided to go to DC. Can't turn back the hands of time, but I am so happy for you. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. So I was honored and to receive, the award with another female this year. There were two female recipients, and it was the George Washington Carver, Hall of Fame, and it's for my work at the Policy Center. So let me just say, I basically said that, that it was authorized, but the mission then of the Policy Center is to conduct research, analyze policy, and make recommendations seeking to achieve equitable, and I'm going to underscore equitable, and economic integration of USDA programs and policies for socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, communities, and landowners. So, the ultimate vision for the Policy Center, if you will, is to be the premier authority for information on the history, cultural conditions, trends, and future projections of socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, and communities.
So with that work, I mean, that's just one of your many jobs. But in the research in the Farm Bill, the impact goes all across the USDA. So people think USDA is one office. I've since learned that under USDA, you have the Forest Service is under the USDA, the National Resource Conservation Service is under the USDA, the Farm Service Bureau is under the USDA, Rural Development is under USDA. What's Dr. Toombs? What's her group? NIFA.
Yes, NIFA. Yes, the National
Go ahead.
Institute. Right. Is NIFA, and actually there are 21 agencies within USDA, bureaus or agencies. They refer to them as agencies within Department of Agriculture. So, and you named some of the key ones, if you will. The Risk Management Agency is another one. The Economic Research Study Service, if you will, or just a couple others. But again, there are 21 in all that represent, that make up, if you will, the United States Department of Agriculture.
And a lot of those organizations utilize real estate appraisals. And most people don't understand the depth and breadth of appraising and evaluation policy and how it impacts the global supply chain. And I just happen to be fortunate enough to have played in a lot of different spaces. Don't know that I'm particularly good at any of them. I just know that they exist and how to expose the opportunities. So in doing that, the natural connection with us working at all of the 1890 land grant colleges has been phenomenal. We started off just working with the U.S. Forest Service, but with you, I've been able to expand. I didn't even know NRCS existed, and so And since there's so many opportunities in the valuation space, and I'm so excited about our students being exposed to these opportunities because over 65% of the industry is over 50 and less than 7% is under 35. And a lot of the population will be not only aging out in the public sector, but aging out in the private sector and in the government sector as well. And there's nobody coming to replace those positions. So in doing work and talking to NRCS, some of the things that they like to see is folks doing more soil sciences in the space. So we're able to work with them. But also, I want you to talk about your work with the 1890 Foundation. That's been extremely impactful and allowing us access to kids and students all over the footprint and being able to be in these spaces and places and create these opportunities for these students has been beyond my wildest dream and imagination.
Oh, so wonderful. Well, so let me say first. So first of all, I have an understanding of, the valuation and appraisals. I spent 22 years actually with Fannie Mae prior to joining USDA. And so, and actually in between was a real estate agent. So, so for me, it was a nice and easy progression. But the work that I do with the 1890 Foundation, then I serve there as the executive director of HBCU initiatives there. And so I actually recruit for USDA. So the 1890 University, the 1890s Universities Foundation then has an agreement with the Natural Resources Conservation Service there to provide career development services to the students across the 1890 university system. And so twice a year, we conduct, if you will, what are called career development workshops. And during these workshops, then, and we usually host them in Atlanta because Atlanta, Georgia is a central location for a good majority of the 1890 universities. So we usually host it in Atlanta, and what we do is provide, if you will, as I mentioned, career development services. So we basically provide resume writing for the students, interviewing techniques, then both the 1 minute resume, if you will, as well as the behavioral event interview techniques. We provide networking, workshops on networking, dressing for success, cultural, basically understanding that as they enter the workforce, they will enter an existing culture. So it's incumbent upon them to learn about the culture or adapt to the culture as opposed to the other way around. We have a workshop on generational differences. And probably one of the biggest benefits is we have then a number of the state conservationists that they get the opportunity to interact with one on one. Either they're in person, some of the minority or the black state conservationists that 25 years ago sat in the seats that the 1890 students sit in. And so now they come back and share with them their career journeys then and why they should join USDA, if you will. And so that has been a very impactful and beneficial for the students.
I think it's extremely important to see people that look like you in the space. If I switch back to the other side, there are no black chief appraisers at none of the major lenders or institutions. There are no black chief appraisers at any of the GSEs. There no. There, I think there is a couple of minorities. I believe at the Forest Service, Jerry Rodriguez, and there is somebody else I can't think of off the top of my head. But it's so important to have people that look like you in the space so you know that it is obtainable and you have a shared background. And a lot of folks are still first generation college and don't know what to expect. And the beauty is a lot of the folks in government, especially when I was blessed to go to HBCU week at the White House, went to HBCUs so they understand the importance of the HBCUs. And now it's probably more important than ever with knocking down affirmative action. And it's always been the HBCUs have graduated over 80% of all minority college graduates. And that is only going to be more important now. And just the ability to teach people how to show up. And when you're talking to them harshly, is from a place of love that they are able to receive without any sort of microaggressions. And we have all sat in that seat at some point or another and able to make the point. One of the things, and I'd like for you to shed a little light on this. I know when you graduated from Hampton with an accounting degree, at some point, most of the people that graduated with you were not working in their fields. And I believe, I don't know which you were talking about, there was a reunion or something, and you had gotten an executive position, and you were talking to folks about accounting, and they were talking about what they were doing, and you just went back to your old school book and recruited a lot of accountants from Hampton. So you have been impacting lives and doing big things for a long time. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Certainly. So I was serving as the deputy director for administration at USDA, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I had over 60 financial analyst accounting positions to fill, and they were not easy to fill. At the time, in the office of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, said, "Oh, you're not going to be able to fill, that many positions in the federal system. Then we're having a hard time recruiting." And for me, nothing like a good old challenge. And so I called on my network. And so, no, I went back to, different individuals that I had graduated with or went to school with at Hampton University to find out what they were doing now and how many were interested. And so recruited a number of individuals through that network into the federal system then. And so that I had gone to school with at Hampton. So, yes.
So that's just remarkable. A lot of times we get someplace and we forget where we came from, and everybody thinks that they made it on their own, not realizing the number of shoulders and sacrifices that we've done. But the other thing that I'm really pleased and impressed with is everywhere we go, I mean, everybody just holds you in such high esteem. And the minute I say I'm with Eloris, it's all good. I'm getting in the door. They return the phone calls a little bit faster now. And again, this is I don't socially. I tend to go back to the room. It's usually Shani, Bilal, Alicia. They hanging out, do what they do and call market research in the evenings when we travel. But going out and meeting you, and then also when we are traveling at the different places, your team is incredible, and they do a phenomenal job. And I'm always welcome. My favorite person on your team who I like to always give a rough time to is Jackson, and teasing him about his fraternity. And we were in Houston, and one of the conservationists, I believe, from the Farm Service Bureau, she was from Missouri. And I was asking Jackson about his Kappa pen, and he said I was cussing, and he got real intense. And we was just, it was always a good time, always good nature, always a lot of good work, but impacting a lot of really profound people. And you also connect with the Farm Service Bureau. Can you talk about some of the other work that you do with not only the 1890s, but some of the 1862 land grant colleges and their extension programs?
Certainly. So you mentioned Jackson Lee on my staff. So actually, the Policy Center, there are currently six staff. So in addition to myself, there are five others. I have a policy analyst, a research analyst, a communication specialist. Jackson serves as my management analyst, and then I have an administrative assistant or program coordinator then. And so we like to say that we are small but mighty. And so the work that we do at the Policy Center, we have four areas of focus. So stakeholder engagement, active research, policy development, and strategic outreach. And so active research then, in the last 8 years since the Policy Center has been in existence, we have completed over 24 research studies then. And like I said, we use that information to educate the House and Senate Agricultural Committee members is one of the things. And so in key, we have six then priority research areas then, including, for example, either those things that support or hinder participation in USDA programs. We look at then the impact of various agricultural policy on socially disadvantaged farmers. We look at then land loss and heirs property specifically there, and primarily across the Black community, because that was the only community that was declining in numbers then. And so we also look at then resources that are available to the socially disadvantaged farmers. Started out looking at technology, access to technology, but what I found as I went around the country, the number one resource that was needed is access to capital or credit. And so we expanded it then to from access to technology to access to resources, period. And then, the fifth area and sixth, the last two, we added youth, as you mentioned earlier, the aging population, if you will, in the agricultural sector. So the average age of farmers is like 59 years old. And so we started looking at youth programs then to develop the next generation of agricultural professionals. And then the sixth area of priority relates to urban and community agriculture, then challenges in the urban agricultural field. You also mentioned the Farm Service Agency. So the Policy Center actually has an agreement with the Farm Service Agencies, actually a couple now, but to facilitate then, if you will, heirs property training. And so that we don't have the resources ourselves to provide, training then across the whole land grant community. So what we do is we have partnered with the University of Arkansas, the Southern Risk Management Education Center. We have partnered with Mississippi State, the Southern Rural Development Center, and like I said, and certainly with 10K appraisals most recently, minority appraisals most recently. But what we did was develop train the trainer, if you will. Then and we provide that training then to the land grant staff, 1862s, 1890s, the 1994 Native Americans, if you will. And so that the extension agents in those respective schools can go out and provide the training in their respective communities then. And so we've been doing that almost 2 years now.
And I am just, again, beyond thankful to be able to work with you and your team. They are really dynamic, and I enjoy them. You mentioned Arkansas. It's been a pleasure to work with Dr. Rainey. You mentioned Southern Mississippi, Roseanne. Just the the number of people that are really making an impact and making a difference, as opposed to giving lip service about something that's really not happening. A couple more things I'd like for you to touch on is the decline in the number of black farmers within the last 100 years, where I believe it was around 1920, 24, there was over 1 million black farmers, and now there's less than 30,000. And then a lot of that research that you all are doing allows us to be able to help with highest and best use analysis and market analysis for crop rotation and valuation. So a lot of times what the farmers are, when they're going to get financing, part of them not being able to get financing is the undervaluation that they receive, just as it is in mortgage lending. It's the same thing in the rural area as well. And we are really excited to be able to combat appraisal bias all across the land with reconsideration of value. We've been at the forefront of reconsideration of value for the last 2 years, and we're instrumental in it being adopted by Fannie and Freddie, and now the banks as of September. The issue now is people not utilizing it properly, and not utilizing subject matter experts or appraisers to be able to get it done. However, we are really happy to be able to work with you all to make sure things are moving right. I'm proud to say we just wrote the 3-hour valuation course for Heirs Property Training. So we're waiting to get our feedback and critiques on how you all want to incorporate that into the train the trainer. And I'm just really excited about 2025.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, one of the things, and that you mentioned, and not everyone knows, so just some historical fact. Now, you mentioned the fact that in 1920, again, there were just about 1 million black farmers in the United States. Then, and at that time, blacks made up roughly 14% of the total population. And so black farmers were roughly 14% of the farming community. Now, in the most recent then study, if you will, what the census found was that there are, as you mentioned, less than 40,000 black farmers in the United States. So there's been a decline of almost 96%. And so they represent less than 2% of the total farming community. However, blacks still represent 14% of the US population. So if you look at that, that is inequitable, if you will. And so one of the things that happened from 1868 to 1934, the federal government gave away 246 million acres of farmland and 160-acre land grants to over 1.5 million white families. And so those federal land grants became the source of wealth creation for millions of white Americans as they improved the land, engaged in agricultural production, and leveraged the asset to start businesses and make investments. And then
Eloris,
over the
why
go
why
ahead.
can't the black farmers just pull themselves up by their bootstraps?
So again, there is a difference between equity and equality. Let me just say that then. And because if you start up here and I start down here, if you give us equal resources, then things will never be equitable, if you will. And so the policy center, and so we're working then to try to make things equitable. That's all that we're trying to, not to give anybody anything, that they're not entitled to or in excess. We want to make sure that there is a level playing field that there is equity in the agricultural market, if you will, is basically what we are striving for.
And I wish we had the illustration of that slide that you presented, because I now, with your permission, I use that slide in my presentations as well. But I got permission first, because it would
Okay.
just it shows the difference in what it looks like, and sometimes people get confused that uh, minorities are asking for a special handout, nothing more than anybody else has already gotten, and we're still playing catch up. And if you look at the
Yes.
velocity of money and missed opportunities, it takes 600 years to even get to even. So again, the work is so important, and the level of sincerity, and especially in the appraisal space, what I really appreciate in traveling the country is there is no accountability. The appraisers want to say there is no bias, there is no this. So, and there may not be bias in appraising. The appraisal model is broken. But I promise you, when I travel the country and I talk to all of these different people who have been undervalued, that's a real complaint. And what I'm excited that we'll be able to do moving forward is offer reconsideration of value, and we're not accusing the appraisers of bias. What we are doing is asking them to be able to explain their work. But in order to do that, you have to articulate it in an objective argument where we specialize in, and it's not emotional. It's not, I think, I feel. This way, the people who feel that they've been harmed can be heard because it's not their imagination. And the people who actually did it get an opportunity to explain their work, how they came to their conclusions, and we're able to articulate the questions. And if they miss something, now we can go back and do an adjustment. FHFA just recently wrote a report within the last 30 days about market analysis not being acknowledged. And so if you acknowledge the market analysis and the increase in market, you go a long way to mitigating a lot of the bias and discrepancy in the valuation. And that's mirrored in rural and urban areas. And so that's part of
Absolutely.
what we've been able to do. And what you're doing is, I just can't praise you enough, because I've seen the results. I've been in all these different places. I've seen the farmers praising you. I've seen NRCS praising you. I've seen the 1890 presidents praising you. And I was like, that's the best Uber ride I ever made in my life. And I didn't know you from a can of paint. And
Mhm.
Shawnee and Alicia were hanging out with you. We had dinner together. And wow, I just think sometimes God puts us in places, and I feel like this has been my life's work, and I'm so thankful. I know you was trying to retire, but they won't let you retire. You still got too much work to do. I know you can't wait to retire and get to those grandbabies, but they still young. They five. They got about another 4 or 5 years where then they can really enjoy all that Meemaw got for
Absolutely. Well, so one of the things in our most recent projects, if you will, is the current state of Black farmers. So let me just, say a couple of things about that real quickly. So USDA published the equity report back in March, April of this year. And so the Policy Center, we had concerns with the equity report, and primarily that it did not address racial equity. And they made a conscious decision not to address racial equity because of the political climate in this country. So we understand their reasons and their rationale, but we made a decision at the Policy Center, said, okay, that's nice, but we are going to address the issue head on. So we decided then to write, if you will, or document our own report. So we have a research based report that is documenting the current state of Black farmers in America there. And it's in two phases. We completed the first phase because we wanted to make sure that we had information to provide to this current administration. And so what we did was look at the existing reports, if you will, the civil rights report, the Jackson Lewis studies. And so we took prior reports that have been documented, analyzed those to see, the recommendations there and which of the recommendations have been implemented and which were still outstanding. And basically we did that, and then we published a report. Phase two, then we will actually interview farmers in primarily the Black Belt, the 13 states, then in those southern regions that have the largest number of Black farmers in the United States, if you will. And we plan by late summer to issue the second or full comprehensive report that not only documents then what has happened in the past, but the current state of Black farming in America there.
That's
So,
really
because
exciting because
our right, well, our intent is to inform and educate.
well, I think that's where it starts. You got to get the information, you got to get the exposure, then you can do the expansion. A lot of our students now are doing research while they're on break with all of the different um, new administration positions. So we're tracking those. We're also tracking the 2018 Farm Bill changes. That's been extended for a little while, and they're excited to be looking at the research and its impact. And we will be also examining it to also display what our plan is to be able to close the wealth gap through valuation. So I'm excited on us being able to release our report on January the 10th. So we are working very, very diligently doing that. And with that, the work, again, that you've been doing has been amazing. And the things that are happening in the heirs property. Can you touch a little bit about that and the lack of loss, or it's just one of the things that you do under the policy center, but it's also very, very impactful and across the country. Not only is heirs property in the rural areas, it's also in the urban areas as well. But it really started and has a big base with the land and the farms in the southeast and the Black Belt.
Right. So we have done actually a couple of research studies. Then first, Auburn University, Mississippi State actually did research on us, looking at then heirs property, if you will, Tougaloo College, and if you will, the disparity um, in and the fact that heirs properties or owners, if you will, do not have the same access to U.S. programs as USDA programs as those farmers or owners that have what is known as clear title. And so, same thing, what we're trying to do is to educate then heirs property owners, if you will, and so that they know that they have options as well as to educate USDA. But so we have developed the train the trainer, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and it consists of three parts: an overview, so it provides the definition, background, what is heirs property, and then we look at then, all right, so once you identify that you have heirs property, then what are some things that you can do to resolve it, if you will? How can you then work to clear title? Whether it's establish a trust and a separate entity, or just a couple of the options, if you will. And then the third is then the prevention. So, how do we prevent heirs property from occurring in the future in the first place? And so that training is all around, if you will, making sure that there is a will prepared, that there is estate planning, that there is clear designation then both in the will and in the deed of who will own this property in the future. Yeah.
Well, that's extremely important. And one of the things that our portion of that training, which I'm excited about, is the fractional interest. So in writing this course, it was important to first state that because of heirs property, you are not able to transfer the full bundle of rights. So before you even get started to do an appraisal or an evaluation, you have to make an extraordinary assumption or a hypothetical condition to lay out the property as its whole. Then you get down to the fractional interest and its level of impact. So I'm really excited that we're able to do that, as well as be able to provide a market analysis and highest and best use to bring about the highest return once the title is cleared for the property. So this has been really a labor of love, and to be able to impact people that are in need and really want it and are really excited for the information that you share. I've been at this a short period of time, and I know how much joy I get out of it. Can you talk about how it makes you feel to have the legacy that you have, and that you've just been put into the Ag Workers Hall of Fame? And the other thing that most people, I will just give them a little bit of a secret. If they see you out, don't buy you no Coca-Cola. You got to have Pepsi. Now, if you want to get on the wrong side of you, show up with a Coca-Cola instead of a Pepsi, and it's going to be a problem.
Yes, that would be correct. And so it is rewarding. Like you said, the reason that, when I started, I only was going to do this. I was asked to do this, stand up. Actually, Congressman Benny Thompson, then, who is one of the Policy Center's strongest supporters and advocates. Then when I first started this journey, I was supposed to do it, less than 2 years. But once I got into and saw the opportunity to have an impact and make a difference, I continued along this journey. And I know that my grandfather, who was a farmer, like I said, in North Carolina, in Wilson, North Carolina, in Greene County, then would be so proud. And so I said, I know he's smiling there. So that's
But
one of
can
the
you talk
reasons.
about that a little bit? That's where your love for farm. Now, you grew up in Philadelphia, but you spent your summers down on the farm in North Carolina. How was
Every
that
summer,
transition
just
for
as
you?
soon as every summer, just as soon as school was out, we were headed down 95 from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Greene County, North Carolina. Like I said, and we stayed until the week before Labor Day, time enough to come back, to go to school. And my grandparents then had a tobacco farm, if you will, at the time. So I spent my summers putting in tobacco. That was my first vehicle that I learned to drive was a tractor at the age of 10. And yes, and actually we even had a mule before the tractor. And
And so,
then
are you going to teach your grandbabies how to drive a tractor at 10?
well, I don't know about 10, but we are planning a trip down to Dr. Cindy Ayers' farm in Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi, then the next spring. And so they have their hats and their boots, and so they're ready to go. Yes, so I plan to make sure that they are exposed to it, as well, to agriculture and to farming there. Absolutely.
Well,
Yes.
I want to say thank you for taking out the time this holiday season to record our final podcast of the year and our first podcast to be aired next year. I am looking forward to working with you. Not to mention, you will be speaking at our fundraiser here in Atlanta on January the 25th. I'm so excited. And again, thank you for trusting and believing in us and allowing us to be able to work with the Policy Center as well.
You're quite welcome. It has been a pleasure.